everybody, this is my trade deadline grades. It's a couple days after the trade deadline, but I think I got it out pretty fast. I will be giving out my grades to every single team. On the right, you will see pictures of some of their major ads, and on the left, you will see every name that they added and lost at the deadline. Some names are going to have a P next to them on the right, and the P pretty much just means that they're a prospect, and if they are a prospect, their picture will not be shown. Not every team has 4 pictures of players, some of them have less, and only a few have none. But we will be getting into it, and our first team, in fact, does have 4 pictures, although that really doesn't matter. You won't be seeing me much this video, as it's going to be these screens pretty much the whole time, but let's get into it. We will be starting it off with the Arizona Diamondbacks. I'm giving them a B-. They didn't really add all that much. They added 2 bullpen pieces in Paul Sewald and Peter Strzelecki, and they added 2 offensive pieces that I think will mainly platoon at DH, and that's Jace Peterson, who will face righty, Tommy Pham, who will face lefties. They did give away 2 main players, in my opinion, those 2 big guys being Dominic Canzoni and Josh Rojas, both traded to the Mariners in the Paul Sewald deal. I think they definitely still had a pretty good deadline, but not good enough to propel them as far as I think they need to go. They'll get a B- from me. Now we have the Atlanta Braves, and I'm giving them a D. They added Brad Hand, Nicky Lopez, and Pierce Johnson, and gave away 3 prospects. I don't think this was a good deadline for the Braves. They did say they were looking for a starting pitcher, but clearly they never found that. They added 2 Rockies relievers who haven't really been good this year, although they do play in cores, so that probably plays a part in it. And then they added Nicky Lopez to the offense, who hasn't hit a home run since 2020, is more of a contact speed guy, but isn't really amazing at either of those things. The Baltimore Orioles will get a C+ from me. They added 2 main pitchers in Jack Flaherty and Shintaro Fujinami, but I don't think they were really all that great to where they can really boost this team. I think they could have done more, but other teams in their division like the Rays and Red Sox and Blue Jays who are going after them also didn't do a ton, but I do think this will be enough to keep them afloat in first place, and they didn't really give up a ton of great prospects in my opinion, outside of Easton Lucas, who looked pretty good to me, who they traded for Shintaro Fujinami. Next up, we have the Boston Red Sox, and I'm giving them a D. They were in pursuit of a playoff spot, and really the only big guy they added was Luis Urias, and I would not really even count him. They added Mauricio Lovera and Nick Robertson to the bullpen, but they're not really big impact players, and I don't think Luis Urias will really be that either, as he's pretty much Christian Arroyo, but just younger. Next up, we have the Chicago Cubs, and I'm giving them a C-. I think they definitely could have done more, as they only got Jeimer Candelario and Jose Cuas, but clearly these additions have been working, as the Cubs have won their first 2 games with them on the roster, and they've scored 20 and 16 runs in each of those games. They did trade away 2 top prospects in DJ Herz and Kevin Made, and they also traded away young right fielder Nelson Velasquez, which I didn't love, but I do think they could have done worse as well as better, so I'll give them a solid C-. Next up, we have the Chicago White Sox, and they're going to get an A- from me. They added 2 young potential great players, and that's Corey Lee and Luis Patino. Even though they haven't looked great at the major league level so far, I think they definitely could be good. They added Trace Thompson from the Dodgers, who will give them some major league talent to replace all the guys they lost. And I think they definitely made the good moves trading away Giolito, Graveman, Lopez, and Middleton, although I don't really love them trading away Jake Burger, and I think they could have traded away more pieces like Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, and Dylan Cease, but they also got a lot of prospects back in return. Kai Bush and Edgar Cuero I don't love, who they got back from the Giolito deal, as they're both having down seasons this year. But Nastrini and Eder, 2 pitchers that they got in return, I really like, and they will get one of the highest grades in this video, an A- from me. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Reds, and they're getting an F. They gave away prospect Joe Boyle, and all they got at the entire deadline was relief pitcher Sam Moll. Yes, he will most likely help out their bullpen, but he's definitely not going to keep them afloat in the top of the NL Central, and I don't think Sam Moll is really what they meant when they said they wanted to add a big pitcher at the deadline. Next up, we have the Cleveland Guardians, who will get a C+ from me. They did trade away Aaron Savale, Josh Bell, and Ahmed Rosario, but Bell and Rosario have been pretty bad so far this year. I don't love them giving Savale away, but they did get MLB's number 37 prospect Kyle Manzardo, who's going to help them at first base, and I think will be a quality option there. They did get Gene Segura back, who I'm pretty sure they designated for assignment, and they also added pitcher Noah Syndergaard, who I guess can kind of replace Rosario, and they also added prospect Khalil Watson, who was a top prospect just a few years ago. The Colorado Rockies will get a C- from me. They got some alright prospects in return for some good major league talent. They got rid of C.J. Cron, Randall Grichuk, and two relievers that went to the Braves in separate deals, Brad Hand and Pierce Johnson. The main prospects they got in return, as you can see, are Mason Albright, Alec Barger, and Jake Madden. I think the Rockies could have gotten some better prospects in return for who they gave up, but a lot of them are on expiring deals, and they couldn't really get a ton for that, so a C- I think is what I'll give them. Next up, we have a C- for the Detroit Tigers. I think they could have traded away more, like getting Eduardo Rodriguez off the roster, which they did trade him for the Dodgers, but he did activate his no-trade clause, and they didn't end up trading him to anyone else. They added two prospects, Hao-Yu Lee and Eddys Leonard, who are not pictured on the screen, but I think they will definitely help them out more than Michael Lorenzen will for this season, as he will not really help a team that is below 500. Next up, we have the Houston Astros, and they're getting a B-. They reacquired Kendall Graveman for the bullpen, which I don't hate the deal, but I'm also not loving it as they gave up Corey Lee. But then they traded away their number 1 and number 4 prospects, Ryan Clifford and Drew Gilbert, Gilbert being number 1, for former Mets starting pitcher and also former Astro coming back to Houston, Justin Verlander. He won the AL Cy Young for Houston just last year, and he was acquired by Houston back in 2017, and he is now returning to help them to a playoff push and hopefully win the division over the Texas Rangers. Next up, I have the Kansas City Royals, and they're getting a B+. They definitely added some bad major league talent, as they got Tucker Davidson, Taylor Hearn, Cole Ragans, and Nelson Velasquez, who have not looked great at the major league level, but most of them are still relatively young. They also got a ton of prospects in return, and they really didn't even give up too much major league talent, as they gave away Scott Barlow, Aroldis Chapman, Jose Cuas, Nicky Lopez, and Ryan Yarbrough. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Angels, and I'm giving them the highest grade of this video so far, and that's an A. They added C.J. Cron and Randall Grichuk to help out with the offense, Dominic Leone and Reynaldo Lopez for the bullpen, and their biggest piece, Lucas Giolito, for the rotation. They are trying to keep Shohei Ohtani in Los Angeles, and they are proving that they can build a better team than they had this year. The Angels are going for a playoff spot, but they definitely gave away some good future Major League talent, mainly Kai Busch and Edgar Quero, who were their number 2 and 3 prospects at the time of trading them. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Dodgers, and I'm giving them a C. I definitely think they could have done more at the deadline, as they added Kike Hernandez, Joe Kelly, Lance Lynn, Ahmed Rosario, and Ryan Yarbrough. They said they wanted to add a starting pitcher on deadline day, and they traded for Eduardo Rodriguez, but obviously, like I said earlier when I was recapping the Tigers, he activated his no-trade clause and did not want to go to Los Angeles. They traded for Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly from the White Sox, who have not looked good this year, but Lance Lynn looked pretty solid in his debut for the Dodgers, and Kike Hernandez has been an okay shortstop for the past few years and will most likely help them out with Ahmed Rosario at the shortstop position. Next up, we have the Miami Marlins, and they're getting a B+. They helped out their bullpen acquiring Jorge Lopez, David Robertson, and Ryan Weathers, and they added 2 big bats in Josh Bell and Jake Burger being my favorite. They did trade away top prospect Jake Eder to the White Sox in these trades. They traded away other top prospects Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez to the Mets to get David Robertson. I do think this Miami team could definitely go to the playoffs, and I really do like the Jake Burger ad, and I think this team will be much better with these new players. Next up, we have the Brewers, and they will also be getting a B+ from me. They acquired some offensive pieces to help out their pretty bad offense, like Mark Canha and Carlos Santana, and they also added one main bullpen piece, and that was Andrew Chafin. They did trade away some prospects, but they weren't really top prospects, and they got rid of Luis Urias and Peter Strzelecki, who weren't really helping out the team this year anyway. Next up, we have the Minnesota Twins, and they are getting an F. They traded away bad reliever for a new bad reliever. They are in first place, and they probably should have bought at the deadline so they could have held that first place spot. But they also most likely know that they're not going to be going very deep in the playoffs, as they're really not that great of a team. The Twins most likely will make the playoffs and win the AL Central, but they're not going to have that great of a team and will also most likely be eliminated in round 1. Next up, we have the New York Mets, and they're getting an A-. They only acquired 2 major league talents to help out their bullpen that is now going to be very bad as they lost their best reliever, and they obviously got rid of their two best pitchers in Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, and they got rid of two offensive pieces in Mark Canha and Tommy Pham. But they got an absolute haul of prospects in return, the main ones being Luis Angel Acuna, Ryan Clifford, Drew Gilbert, Ronald Hernandez, and Marco Vargas. I think this Mets team can be very good in the future, and Luis Angel and Ronald will be able to fight each other as brothers in the exact same division now, and I think this Mets team is going to look amazing in the future with their new prospects they've acquired. Next up, we have the New York Yankees, and they're getting an F from me. They brought in Keenan Middleton and Spencer Howard, and they are both players that won't really help out the Yankees a ton, especially Howard. Howard used to be a top prospect, and the Yankees are most likely trading for him to try to fix him, and Keenan Middleton has been an alright reliever this year, although he hasn't been great lately. I'm giving the Yankees an F because they said they would be looking to buy at the deadline, and this is not what I would call buying. I'm giving the Oakland Athletics a C-. I think they definitely could have traded more, as I highly disagree with the fact that they didn't trade away Brent Rooker, but they also got some okay prospects in return like Joe Boyle, Easton Lucas, and Chad Patrick for some major leaguers that were not going to help them out in the future. Next up, we have the Philadelphia Phillies, and I'm giving them a B. I liked the Rodolfo Castro trade, but I also didn't love them getting rid of Bailey Falter, and they only traded away one prospect to acquire All-Star, which he was only an All-Star because he was on the Tigers, Michael Lorenzen. Lorenzen's been having a pretty solid season so far, and he will definitely help bolster their rotation as Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler both have slightly down years. Next up, we have the Pittsburgh Pirates, and they're getting a D. They added Bailey Falter, who I do like, but they also got rid of Rodolfo Castro, who I don't love them getting rid of. They did get rid of some great Major League talents like Ji-Man Choi and the best hitter in the league, Austin Hedges, but they also acquired one of the worst players, in my opinion, Alfonso Rivas. I mainly hate him because he was an everyday first baseman for the Cubs for an entire season, and he was absolute trash. But he can go in Pittsburgh, where they're pretty much used to absolute trash, as they've been that for the last few years. Next up, we have the San Diego Padres, and they'll be getting a D from me. They added Scott Barlow, Ji-Man Choi, Garrett Cooper, and Rich Hill. As they said they were buying, they did not trade away Blake Snell, Josh Hader, or Juan Soto. Their version of buying was pretty much getting two first basemen, one of them that can hit righties and one of them that can hit lefties. They got a reliever with a 5 ERA, and they got a starting pitcher who's been pitching for almost 50 years now. Their team is not any better than it was at the beginning, but they also traded away almost nothing to get this, but they're definitely not going to make the playoffs as they just added pretty much nothing at the deadline. Next up, we have another NL West team that was very disappointing in my opinion, and that's the San Francisco Giants, getting an F. They added A.J. Pollock and Mark Matias from the Mariners, but I don't think they're really going to help out all that much, as they had many other gaping holes than just a right fielder and a utility man who probably isn't going to help out at all. Next up, we have the Seattle Mariners, and I'm giving them a C. They definitely sold off some key pieces like Paul Sewald and A.J. Pollock, but they got back two players that I really like in Dominic Canzoni and Josh Rojas, Canzoni being my favorite. I definitely think he can help them in the outfield in the future, but I also think they could have traded away more, mainly Teoscar Hernandez in my opinion. Next up, we have the St. Louis Cardinals, and they're getting a B-. I think they could have traded away more, potentially Paul Goldschmidt, but they definitely traded away quite a bit, including 3 separate trades with the Blue Jays that gave away 2 relievers in Genesis Cabrera and Jordan Hicks, and their shortstop Paul DeYoung. They also got rid of other key pitchers in Jack Flaherty, Jordan Montgomery, and Chris Stratton. This team is not going to be looking good for the rest of the year, but they also got some solid prospects that will help them in the future. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Rays, and they're getting a C+. They pretty much only added Aaron Savale at this year's deadline, and they gave away a top prospect in Kyle Manzardo, and they also gave away Luis Patino, who could definitely still have some potential as a top major leaguer in my opinion, and like I said, they really didn't get much else other than Aaron Savale. Our next team is the Texas Rangers, and they are getting the only A+ of the video. The Rangers addressed their main need, which was pitching, going out and getting Aroldis Chapman, who's had an amazing year for the Royals so far, and 2 of the best pitchers of the market, Jordan Montgomery, and then potentially the best pitcher on the market, Max Scherzer. They did give away top prospect Luis Angel Acuna to acquire him, but they didn't really give up a ton of other prospects to get the other guys they got. They did give away 4 major league talents, all of them being pitchers, 3 left-handed and 1 right-hander, but none of them were really helping the team this year and could definitely be traded away, as the 5 guys that they did add at the deadline will definitely help them, except for probably Austin Hedges. Next up, we have the Toronto Blue Jays, and they're getting a C-. They got 3 Cardinals players in 3 separate trades for some reason. Not sure why they didn't just get all 3 of them in one trade, but they did add 3 players, and the main 2 they got are Jordan Hicks and Paul DeJong. Paul DeJong was brought in to help shortstop as Bo Bichette just went down with an injury, and the other 2 were also brought in for the same reason, as the bullpen needed a bit of help, and Jordan Romano just went down for an injury, as Jordan Hicks will most likely be taking on a setup or closer role for Toronto. And finally, we have the Washington Nationals, who will be getting a B-. I think they could have traded away a little bit more than Jeimer Candelario, but they did get 2 main prospects in DJ Herz and Kevin Made. I'll see you next video, which will probably be about a week from now. I hope you enjoyed my trade deadline grades. Tell me if I got anything wrong, and I'll see you next time. Bye.